32984. I see you in the comments. The officiating tonight. We probably could have had an entire show about officiating. Actually, a good friend of mine was here watching it with me tonight. He's still here lurking in the background somewhere. And I told him that, Ellie, you're normally one of the more calm, down-to-earth, reserved people in our group chats during games. So when you were getting fired up about the officiating, you know it's bad. When you have Fowler and Kirk Herbstreit on TV getting fired up about the officiating, you know it's bad. And maybe this shouldn't be a surprise because it was an SEC crew with an SEC team, but man, there was so much of it tonight. That intentional grounding on Sean Clifford, I've never
Don't
seen
even get me started on that.
Yeah, I've never seen it called before where it occurred because a receiver ran the wrong route. That's football. That's going to happen. You can't penalize the team for that. And that wasn't even the most egregious thing on that possession. The down, for anyone who did not watch the game, there was a possession in the second quarter. I think it was Parker Washington, I want to say. It was either him or Dotson. Clifford thought they were going to run a post. They ran a comeback. Clifford overthrows him. Called for intentional grounding. Should not have been intentional grounding. The down marker got flipped from first down to third down instead of first down to second down. So it brings up a third, I think it was like 15 or so. Penn State runs a little out route to Dotson. They got about 7 or 8 yards. So you're thinking, all right, 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9, manageable with your passing attack. And the referee says 4th down. I don't know how James Franklin controlled himself enough to avoid getting a unsportsmanlike conduct penalty there. I would not have. As someone who coaches his kid's 6th grade football team, in 6th grade football, I would have lost my mind over that, let alone in this situation. And that was just the beginning of it. I mean, there was a no call on a intentional grounding on Bo Nix that was much more egregious than that. The fake punt Penn State ran where the whistle was never blown. PJ Mustipher lands probably 2 yards clear of the first down marker, and they marked him short of the first down by half a yard. It was just seemingly one thing after another. And I'm not one to blame officials. I'm not one to say officials are dirty or have their own little whatever they're going for. But man, when it's SEC officials and you have the SEC teams on the road, and there was a late hit call on Brandon Smith late in the game that might have been the weakest late hit call I have ever seen. Just it was one thing after another. It was so frustrating. And I'm sure people listening or Penn State fans will agree. The fact Penn State overcame such piss poor, excuse my language, such piss poor officiating to win this game made it that much more enjoyable for me.
Yeah, I am so glad that we don't have to talk about Penn State having lost this game because of officiating. And as you mentioned, right, I'm not one to complain about officiating. I do acknowledge that time and situation, and if a ref makes a bad call when it's close to the end of the game, that has a lot more impact than if it happens early in the game, which the most egregious of all the calls happened to be early enough that I didn't bite Penn State. But could you imagine if that call had happened on the drive where they went up 28-20, and that touchdown basically doesn't happen because they lose it down? That would have been. I don't even want to think about it. And as you said earlier, right, like level-headed. I'm not gonna blame the refs, but I've also believed one thing, and I'm gonna probably go around here, which is what. Look, I understand why conferences fine coaches and schools for talking about the refs in a negative light, but I would like for conferences to also acknowledge that, like, we sometimes treat refs like gods, and they're not. They're just people. Don't harass refs, right? Don't send death threats to refs. Don't actually assault refs, because they are human beings and we all make mistakes. But acknowledge that as humans, they made mistakes, right?
Yeah.
We're not going to pretend that what happened on the field tonight was okay. Like, this basically took me back to the 90s in like a reverse bizarro world where instead of giving people extra downs, we're taking them away from people. It's like that is not something that James Franklin shouldn't be able to talk about. And in fact, when Holly Rowe interviewed them at half, he like had the presence of mind to not even say anything because he knew that if he actually opened his mouth when she asked about that, he was going to get fined. So the it's great that Penn State was able to overcome all of the mistakes, and I'd be a fool to say that some of the bad calls didn't go in Penn State favor. They did, but this crew, and I know that I'm seeing the comments. It's a lot about this being an SEC crew, but like the reality of the matter, the Big Ten refs aren't any better. So yeah. I'm not about to sit here and say that were this a Big Ten crew that they would have made their own set of mistakes. But what I'd like to see acknowledged moving forward is that these refs are human beings and they can make mistakes, and we don't disparage them for making them, but we accept that they do.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, I thought that interview with James right before going to the locker room was great because you could tell
he was mad.
Yeah, when Holly asked him, "What do you think about the officiating?" It was almost like he wanted to talk. He said to himself, "No, don't do it." Took that deep breath and kind of shrugged his shoulders. Now, my personal favorite part about it was when Holly Rose starts laughing and she's like, "Yeah, what else can you say?" Like they all knew it was poor, and like you said, it wasn't all against Penn State. There was a call. Now, this got overturned by review, but there was a play at one point where Jahan Dotson was tackled almost 2 full yards short of the first down. Originally, they gave him the first down. It was very poor officiating. Now, again, yes, Auburn got more poor calls in their favor than Penn State did, which, like you said, had Penn State lost this game, it would have been extremely frustrating for that reason. But again, also, like you said, as Penn State fans, we have watched so much incompetent officiating from the Big Ten over the years. Like, I would take this crew any week over any crew that has John O'Neill on it. Like, it's just no. John O'Neill that's a name we try to avoid speaking in my household. It's just, but ultimately, like you said, I think the biggest thing is I couldn't agree more. If we're going to hold coaches, we're going to hold players accountable for speaking out against poor officiating. Officials need to be held accountable when they make mistakes. And this isn't just a college football thing. You know, I don't think I have too much of a tangent, but like I'm a huge baseball fan as well. You see umpires every game who are calling pitches that are 3 feet off the plate of strike or calling pitches that are right down the middle of the ball. Like officials in all of sports need to be held accountable as well. I think you put it perfectly when you said too many times you see these sports leagues almost hold them up as if they're some sort of gods. They're not. Yes, they're there to help the game flow just like well and everything. But at the same time, they can have the complete opposite effect on the game. And when they do have the complete opposite effect on the game, like we saw tonight, they need to be held accountable. They need to face repercussions because what's going to happen eventually is you're going to have an officiating crew officiating an important game, a conference title game, you know, 2 teams battling it out for a trip to the conference title game, a playoff game, whatever it might be, where they just get call after call after call wrong, and it winds up costing a team a very important game. And that is why we need to get to the point where we can hold these officials accountable and not just penalize coaches, players, etc., for speaking out against the officials.